Right now, we're at 68% stability, which is an increase of over, 7% from 5 years ago.
And Dr. Spiller, so if a student enrolls at Excellencia and in the year moves to Loma Linda, they're considered a stable student?
No, they're not considered stable.
Okay.
So we count any child that has a building change.
Building change.
Yeah, they're excluded from the stability formula.
Okay, thank
And
you.
this is just 1 year?
The 68 is 1 year. Last year it was 67. The year before was 66. Oh, and
I mean, yeah, like, so if, take Matt,
Right.
Carl's example, they started at Excellencia, they finished the year at Excellencia.
but then they moved them out of Vista.
The next year,
That's right.
and stay there, they would be considered stable.
Yes, as long
It's
as
just
they don't
1 year
change
time.
within the year.
Okay,
Yeah, it's an annual calculation.
okay, thank you.
So it's really nice that parents do time it to move only during the summers. But you're right, we don't capture the kids who might be moving to a different school every year. We wouldn't capture that. Our population is low SES, 91% low SES, and this is calculated from participation in free and reduced lunch programs. So we're pretty stable on that calculation also. English language learners is problematic in that the state has changed the ASELA, or the English language acquisition test, from year to year. And so just in this chart alone, when we go back to 2008 here, we're probably either on IPT or SELP at that time, then it changed to ASELA 1, then it changed to ASELA 2, and this year we're going to switch to ASELA 3.
Mm-hmm.
So every time they changed the test, it was a little bit what we call easier or less difficult, or the rules changed. So one of the big changes in the rules was, it used to be on the IPT and the SELF test that a child had to pass every one of the subcategories on the test before they're considered proficient. And now they just get a sort of an average score, and if the composite hits a certain benchmark, then they are reclassified. So it's interesting, through the years, we have a decreasing number of English language learners, but that's not to say that our population has changed. So we still have English language learners still affect all of our classrooms every day. So as we were working with WestEd earlier in the month, we were talking about talking points and descriptions of what our Moving Up initiative is about. So these are 2 talking points that we are working on. And one of them is Creighton School District is participating in school reform that is systematic and multifaceted. Because I think it's not, what we want to do is communicate that we're not doing one thing, we're doing like 10 things at the same time, but in a very careful way. This reform is a deep philosophical paradigm shift to accelerate student learning. So we do like that talking point also, because what we have to do is change all stakeholders' way of viewing the district and the student achievement, because we want to capture the fact that we're doing a really significant paradigm shift that actually takes 5 or more years before it can be maintained. So the 5 initiatives that actually impact our classrooms is that we implemented a guaranteed and viable curriculum to all students. So when you look at what that looks like on paper or to teachers, you see pacing guides that have identified essential performance objectives. You have units or unpacked curriculum documents that give them insight on how there's enduring understanding, essential questions, learning targets, and criteria for success. Pacing guides actually aren't just paced, they aren't just a recommended pacing, it's actually a required pacing. So they need to be at a certain place at a certain time so the children can take a common formative assessment. That assessment data is aggregated up, and we can look at how schools, grade levels, and sites are performing. And we do that so that we have enough time to provide an intervention to students that aren't performing, grade levels that aren't performing, and sites that aren't performing.
Are we able to use this then to determine which teachers are more effective at teaching specific units, or how do we use that for anything other than just making sure students are on track?
It definitely is an indication of students, for teachers that are being ineffective. We never use just one set of data to determine that. Then it would require, of course, they're already in there, doing T4S observations and other people going into the classroom to infer.
Mr. Zaragoza, typically that CFA data is looked at by each school leadership team, and they're looking at that, and they're looking for those patterns of strengths and weakness based on how teachers are performing, and then they make those decisions that Lynn was just talking about in terms of how to provide that support.
Yep.
But in the future, we are going to use growth on quarterly benchmark assessment data in our teacher evaluation system. We are not going to use common formative assessment data within our teacher evaluation system. So that actually leads into implement a district assessment plan designed to provide interventions for students who are not mastering the curriculum. So when we design our district assessment plan and the calendar for when these assessments are implemented, the rule is that we never give an assessment that we don't use. So every assessment is used to identify students who are not performing at grade level or not mastering instruction in order to provide an intervention. So right now we don't have any tests. I can only actually think of one. There is one little test that sort of infers that, and that's the second grade SAT 10, which is required by the state that all second graders take. And we sort of look at that data, but that doesn't actually infer an intervention. That's about the only one. So we refine and improve implementation of response to intervention, including mathematics and behavior, to provide interventions for all students. So our response to intervention initiative has been very, very successful. We're very excited about it. We saw that 19% increase in special ed proficiency in the first year. We've seen Tier 2 and Tier 3 implemented really well on the campuses. We actually can see the effect of students moving from Tier 1 back into core classrooms, and we see Tier 3 students moving into Tier 2. So we implemented this year RTI, including mathematics, and the science did a very intensive RTI implementing behavior within the classrooms. What they wanted to do was work on core behavior within the classrooms in order to impact the behavior, decrease inappropriate behavior on the campuses. So our fifth initiative is refine and improve implementation of academic parent-teacher teams to increase meaningful parental involvement in students' educational experiences. And Lynn Vineyard is going to talk to you about that this afternoon. But that was a very exciting initiative. Now those are the initiatives that you probably have heard a lot about in the past. But we want to talk about what the district leadership initiatives were on this Moving Up initiative. Developed through mentoring and consultation a leadership team that has expertise in providing job-embedded professional development to change instructional practices school-wide. So what this looks like on a campus is that the principals have been trained on the Teach for Success observation tool. The teachers have been trained on it, and instructional coaches. They've also received coaching training, and so they go out. They're required to go out to every teacher's classroom twice in a quarter and provide job-embedded coaching to the teachers based on what they see in the classroom. So that we do look at that data on a quarterly basis. Processes that use data and research to monitor and solve learner-centered and program-centered problems. We're committed in this district to not using guesswork in suggesting solutions. We're committed to using only scientifically validated programs and procedures or instructional strategies that'll work for we consider them a fragile student population. So we can't use guesswork, we can only use data, and we have to use those scientifically validated methods. We also have expertise in developing, implementing, and monitoring aligned curriculum instruction and assessment. So through our WestEd consultation, and they mentor us also, we're making sure that we only use those processes and procedures and monitoring that's in the research and says that they're going to work. So when you go and watch us as we develop our curriculum or even our assessments, we've been mentored through consultation for the last 4 years on making sure that our assessments are valid and reliable. We have expertise in developing, implementing, and monitoring response to intervention and academic parent-teacher teams. So through the West Ed mentoring for the last 4 years, they've guided us on how we're going to monitor and evaluate whether these programs are working. So it's interesting when we took a survey with our leadership team, and one of the questions was, how often do you do program evaluation? And we actually had somebody say, well, I don't think we've ever done program evaluation. Well, I took that personally. So now every time I put data in front of the leadership team, I say, we're doing program evaluation today. And this is what it looks like. So I know Shar and Jim, or Dr. Boyle and Dr. Weiner, are used to this slide because we actually started using this, I think it was like 2001. I took a training on program evaluation, and I just sort of like the three-dimensional effect of the slide. And in program evaluation, we evaluate how much did we do? What did you put in place? How well did you do that? How hard did you try? And then what effect did you produce? So those were sort of thought questions used in the training, and we actually apply that in as we develop programs and then evaluate programs. So we get it down to input and output. So the input is, how much service did we deliver? And so the example I have is, at one time, I think it was, oh gosh, I can only remember the initials. Tessa, Teach, Tessa, what's the initials for Tessa? You remember, don't you, Artie?
I know, I should.
Well,
I
we,
have a binder if you want me to.
I know Charlotte still has a binder.
Teacher expectations.
That's right, teacher expectations, success for,
It was teacher expectations.
For student success.
Yeah. Learning is something.
excellent. But I do remember his teacher expectations lead to increased student achievement. And I remember that we only had like 1 day of training, everybody was asked to implement it, and that's when the realization came to all of us that 1 day of training and expecting implementation doesn't work. It's not enough input. And I can guarantee you we don't have anything like that going on anymore. So how much service we deliver usually is, it could be daily in services on how to get increased instructional strategies. Then how well do we deliver the service? We always check our evaluations to see, did our objective come across to the teachers, or did something interfere with their learning, teachers or any other staff member? Then how much effect or change did we produce? So for example, when we were doing Common Core standards, the question was, from the training, how many units actually were developed and what was the quality of those units? We evaluate that, and that tells us whether our input was sufficient to get the quality of product that we needed. And then what quality of effect or change did we produce? Well, I call that the fourth quadrant, and that's where I'm looking for an increase in, for example, an increase of T4S observations. I'm looking for an increase in student achievement in math or reading or writing, depending on what the workshop was. And so, or an increase in students' progress monitoring if it's for response to intervention. So the questions for program evaluation is, what did we do, and how well did we do it, and is anybody better than last year, or demonstrating growth? So we ask those questions in order to inform us, how can we problem solve an implementation to make it better for the next year? So we begin each school year by evaluating the student and teacher assessment data to provide insight and refining our program delivery. So we started doing that. As soon as we got data, we started analyzing it. So we actually had our iSteep data at the end of April last year, and we already were evaluating it. And it actually was giving us some good news. Then we got the Ames data, and we saw problems in it, and so we all start becoming very introspective about what is it about this data that we didn't expect. And so we constantly are refining the data. We get down to July, where we started having our principals meetings and putting the data in front of the principals and their leadership team. And that continues. I just had a meeting with Papago, lasted, I think it was 3.5 hours long, and we weren't done. I just said, just say uncle when you guys can't take any more of this, because we'll just come back later and start on another set of data. So the superintendent, assistant superintendent, directors, and principals develop action plans for the new school year that describe detailed steps to complete these refinements. So for example, my action plan for response to intervention was 5 pages long. So many of these action plans are very detailed. I myself like detail. Some people's aren't quite as detailed. I like a lot. And not that, but I modified them during the year when I think I've left something out. The action plans are reviewed quarterly for additional targeted tweaks to maximize results during the school year. Oftentimes we find out really the biggest failing of all our action plans is usually communication. The idea is up here in somebody's head. You know, they might even have it on paper, but when we go to implement it, we didn't communicate it, and then we have resistance, frustration, resentment. I mean, it's really key on communication. It has to be communicated. Final evaluation is completed by June on the current school year for effect on student and teacher assessment data. So then at the end we say, okay, so how well did response to intervention work this year? Or how well did our data meetings on CFAs A and B? You know, how well did our curriculum guides work? What do we have to fix? So the results of this continuous improvement process over the last 10 years, Creighton School District is on a positive trend to accelerating student achievement. Over the last 4 years, we've participated in the project with Ellis and West Ed to restructure leadership and program delivery. And over the last 4 years, we have seen an accelerated rate of student learning. So these are the charts of looking longitudinally at the aggregation of reading proficiency for all students at the district and at the state. And I've indicated where we started our partnership with West Ed. So you can see that we were already on a positive trend to increasing student achievement, but even at that time, Cabinet realized that we weren't on an it needed to be accelerated growth or we'd never catch up and we would be identified as a failing district. So with the that wonderful partnership with Ellis and West Ed, we have shown a remarkable improvement in reading achievement. It's increased 18% over 4 years, which is an average of 4.5% each year. We are on I call it the slope, the rise over run. That rate of student learning is higher than that of the state, which was what the expectation for this project was.
Dr. Spiller? We're measuring here reading proficiency. Is this at all grades? Is this at third grade? What is this?
This is aggregated, but I'm going to show you separate grade levels in a few minutes.
Okay, thank you.
Because when you aggregate things, it doesn't show you the whole story, and it's important to drill down to the whole story.
Okay, but just so I'm understanding this, in 2008, about half of our students were proficient at reading, and in 2012, 69% are.
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
that's true.
Are you seeing how I am interpreting this chart is that 2011 we hit a height and we're kind of like stagnant now?
We actually
or
had
leveling off, platforming, whichever euphemism you wish.
I know one data set doesn't infer a trend. I mean, but we had a positive trend from 2008 to 2011. We can see that, but the 2012 is either a flat line or decrease, and we won't know until another year of data. But we're truly concerned about it.
And we're still like approximately 8-9 points behind
The state.
Arizona. Okay.
Right. So, and you might say, well, gee, what is your strategy for problem solving that? So,
I didn't say that.
we did. We did. We're like, what are the things we should check on this? So the list was actually about 30 steps long. It was to check. Let's look at teacher absenteeism. Let's look at student absenteeism. Let's look at the CFAs. Did that prophesize what was going to happen? What about the quarterlies? You know, I mean, we had an extensive list of things we went through. did we have a heads up about this? So when we look at the math, I have the 2006 to 2009 on there, but in 2010, the standards and the tests changed. And so that's why there was this significant drop in both the state and the schools. But what I wanted to show is we were on a positive trend that was greater than the state's rate before that test change, and then after the test, we both dropped, and then you can see that our rate of improvement is greater than the state. And so it looks like in the future we would eventually catch up to the state. Maybe not necessarily, it won't be this year, and I know we had all hoped that we were going to catch the state this year. So it was interesting, I just put math and reading together, so you can see when the first tests were made in 2005, that the math and the reading had the same percent proficiency for the state overall, and then when they changed the state, we fell off, or everybody fell down in 2010, and now they have different sets of proficiency rates. So that, it's interesting when we have a change in standards, and I just wanted everybody to see that because it's going to happen again when we get the PARCC assessments. It's going to be really significant. I don't know, it'll be interesting to see the difference between reading and math, or will it go back to being where they do voodoo math, percent proficiency is going to be the same,
So
reading and math.
even when we have this PARCC assessment, when we look at proficiency in reading, that's going to be a whole different number.
Yes. A whole different test will be throwing out all our longitudinal analysis, but we will be able to compare to the state to get some idea of how we're performing with the state and other districts like us. Because it's really tough when you change assessments. Who are you going to compare to?
And we're going to give you some examples of a couple of assessment items that are coming off the NAEP that we think are going to be close to the type of assessment items we're going to be seeing on the PARCC, but we don't know for sure. So right now, we're working off of the Common Core and developing that curricula as well as the units and aligning some short cycle assessments to that. And we think we know where some of the items, what the items might look like, but we really won't know until we actually see those tests.
Well, the NAEP test itself, does that change over time?
The NAEP isn't supposed to. It's supposed to be
I think there's a period on the NAEP where every so many years they do some changes. with the
Recalibrate?
items. Yeah, they
I
recalibrate.
have to look at it.
Yeah. I mean, maybe for another board meeting, but I'd love to learn more about the NAEP because that's the piece, or the assessment that people look at over time and to measure whether we're doing anything that's making a difference. And I don't know why we don't just use something similar in Arizona or even in this district.
That's the $1 million question for sure. I think Sylvia's going to show you, we're going to go to a website later today, and she's going to show you, these are released items that are no longer used on the NAEP that we think will be PARCC-like items. And in there's, it kind of shows you on a national level the performance rate of students on those types of items. So it'll start to give you an idea of the kind of items our students are going to have to be proficient on, the way the teaching is going to change so that they can be there, and some of the predictions about how students are going to do on those PARCC assessments are pretty dire in terms of them first coming out. And so we'll talk about a little bit more about that later, but that all ties into the state.
It does. So what's interesting about what we've realized in the past, our math scores for our children were higher. We had higher percent proficiency in math and reading, but after the new standards, they reversed. So now we have higher reading than math. It's always interesting to us, but just to say, the test construction means everything about these scores. When they change the test, then we have to implement those changes in our classroom before we get an increased rate in student learning. which requires an enormous amount of professional development. So we started our professional development on Common Core standards last year. We had 8 or 9 meetings with the principal, with the teachers working on new units for Common Core standards. So, I want to just talk about the difference between rate of learning and rate, and it's actually 8th grade math to talk about slope. So slope is the rise over run of a graph, the steepness of a hill, or the rate of learning. So before West Ed, Creighton had a rate of learning that was 2.5 times Arizona, but after West Ed, we actually had a rate of learning that was 3.3 times that of the state of Arizona. So those are the points of comparison that we use. We'll be able to use that type of comparison when we get 2 or 3 trends on the new park assessments. We can tell how our kids' rate of learning is.
Dr. Spiller, just for the historical context here, I've heard reference to a time when Creighton was led by Dr. Covey, and Creighton being the leading district in the state. Was that in terms of like, and what metrics does that represent? Because what happened between Dr. Covey and now that we're now trying to catch up to being where we supposedly maybe were?
Just to let you know, that was prior to my employment here.
I don't, at the time, because I was here, I don't remember us being one of the best in the state. I don't know where the data is coming from that is demonstrating that, so I can't really speak to it.
Mm-hmm.
I can tell you that when I first came to this district, there were, which is 22 years ago, there were 4,500 students, and the majority of them were English-speaking Anglo students, and the majority of them were probably in the middle class of the socioeconomic levels.
Mm-hmm.
So the population of students began changing around that point. We began getting more Spanish speakers. Our poverty rate began to increase. I know those variables changed from 22 years ago to today. As far as what data they're looking at, to say that we were one of the best in the state at that point, I'm not aware of what that data is, to be honest with you.
And for clarification, it wasn't Dr. Covey who said this. I think I hear it from Superintendent Rosenthal. Just, yeah, for what it's worth, for the record.
And also, in about 1990, again, the demographics changed dramatically. When I went into Papago School as principal, there were 2 ELL classes, one in kinder and one in first grade, and 3 years later there were 14.
Mm-hmm.
And that happened really throughout the district in a little different percentage. At that time, though, students who were Spanish speakers did not take an English state test. They took a Spanish test, and they were able to do it for a period of 3 years. So when the law changed in 2001, then all students had to take an English form of test, even though they may have been Spanish speakers. So that's one of the things, although then it depends on how that data was interpreted.
But there's no way to really calculate how the data they use is very different than what we do now, and including who takes the test and okay.
And
the farthest back data that I have that is valid and reliable is 1997, and that was the SAT 9. So I have that data, which actually shows the average percentile rank for the students at each grade level, and it was exceedingly low.
Okay.
But that's after, as Dr. Boyle said, the change in the demographics to where we were probably at 92% Hispanic at that time.
What was in the statewide superintendent at that time, and when it changed that the Spanish-speaking population could not take a Spanish-speaking test? Do you know?
that was a
was it before Tom?
yes.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
I can look it up. I was
Yeah.
just wondering.
There were a series of state superintendents in uh-huh. And for a year it was Jaime Malera. Mhm.
I was just wondering.
So, as we're analyzing our data, I thought it was important to look at the rate of learning to help us identify which of the programs we needed to focus resources and money on. So as you look at reading, you can see that I've done a calculation for trend, what is the prediction based on previous data of what we think reading's going to be like in the future. So you can see the rate of reading to going from 2012 to 2018 is on a more positive trend than the math itself. So we know that we need to change how we're instructing in math, and you will hear about plans for increasing our rate of learning in math this year. So the biggest question we all have is, are we better off than before? So as we look at this is aggregated data of reading from 2005 to 2012. And it's a great chart because we can see that good things are happening, but we can also see where we'd like to see improvements. So this is the FAME data, so the red is falls far below, the yellow is approaches, the green is meets, and the blue is exceeds. And we can actually see that our exceeds group is growing larger from year to year, but we definitely would like to see that to be 20, 30, 40%. We'd really like to see that exceeds group grow. And then on the inverse, we'd also like to see that falls far below group. We'd like to see it disappear. We want it to see it gone. Now we actually see that on some of our sites, and in the study session where we talked about scores, you probably will see some of those stack bar charts where some sites have actually, exited all those kids and they're now in the yellow, green, or blue. So the slope of the line indicates the rate of improvement, and increasing proficiency is improving faster than increasing the number of students in the exceeds group. We can see that from the line. So we really would like to focus on how to increase how to work with the kids that are at that end of our spectrum of students. We'd like to decrease the number of students in falls far below. So this is the math so that we can see. I looked at the scale score. I'm always interested in why math shows more exceeds than the reading, and they must use a different process. Because in math, you can get 81% on the test and be in the exceeds group, but in reading, you have to be at 92% of the test. So that's why the two groups are different. So just to let you know, it all depends on the task construction and where they put their cut scores. And that's controlled by ADE. We definitely are very concerned that our falls far below group is very large in math, and our whole point of our program for this year is to decrease that falls far below group so that they're prepared to go on to high school in higher math. So this is my effort on how to tell you how we focus on new schools or new programs for the school year, and we call it triangulation, and I just put a cute little graphic up there just to say, taking different points of data, what identifies maybe a program or a school or grade level as needing intervention. If it comes up in data several times, then we triangulate it and we say, we really do have to work on, say, third grade reading because it's come up on our assessments many times. So we're going to move into different ways of looking at our data, and one is Arizona Learns. Just to let you know that this information was just released on August 2nd, so this slide already has an incorrection in it. Loma Linda's final total was 134. Stephanie called me up to make sure I knew that.
So you're looking at this word instead of 132?
It's 134. And so I don't remember that any. Pardon?
6 points from an A.
Oh, that's exactly what she was pointing out.
She wanted us to understand.
She said, I'm going in front of my staff. I want to make sure I can say this. Can I say I'm 6 points away from the A? And I said, I see it too, Stephanie. You're 6 points. So I will update this slide and send it and you will receive the new updated counts for Arizona Learns. It would be nice if they'd stop changing how they calculate things, because it's really hard to do that longitudinal analysis if they change it. So what we looked at was, did we have some sites that went up, which of course we want to celebrate Loma Linda. We're so excited the Biltmore Prep went up, because that tells me there isn't a real ceiling effect, because they already have high scores, yet they still are able to demonstrate growth on their campus. We congratulate Gateway for improving their overall point total. They had low student achievement the previous year, and they did have some improvement in this year. They're still a C school. We want to celebrate LCK for having some increase, and Mackin showed some increase, and they still missed a B school by 1 point. So I know Eric was in my office going, there has to be some way I can get 1 more point. You could try buying it.
Dr. Spiller, how many, so, I mean, some of these, the numbers are kind of the same, they're not much movement, and others there's a pretty significant shift. So like, what would represent like a significant growth or decrease? Because like 2-3 points to me doesn't look like a lot, but then I see some that are 13, and then I see some that are even more. So like, what would be significant?
Anytime you move a category would be significant, but you know that
Even like 119 to 120 is significant.
it moves you a category, but the growth wasn't as significant as, like, Mackin grew 8 points on Arizona Learns. When you go look at the growth of percent passing at each of the grade levels, you'll see what growth happened at that school, but it wasn't enough to get them a B. So that's why it's frustrating, I know, for them to show so much growth in both percent passing and in growth itself, but yet they still didn't move a category.
Yeah, so like the categories mean less to me than, like, what does it take to move 1 point, 2 points?
Well, let's go
15
over that.
points?
Yeah, so, is that on my next slide? I'm not sure. Okay, this is the best slide to do it on. So the pie chart that there's in the upper left of your screen is actually a definition of how you earn 100% of the points on Arizona Learns. So the half that's gold is percent passing. So 50% of Arizona Learns on percent passing. So if your scores go down, you are losing points right there off of, half of your points on Arizona Learns is on percent passing for reading and math. So the only student excluded from that are going to be students not at your school for the full academic year. Those are the only kids that are excluded. When you look at the red and blue side of the circle, that is 50% is on growth. And this is that interesting Colorado growth model calculation. It's nothing that we can even attempt to calculate for each student, because they take each student on a first test, what's their cohort in the state. Then they take the test again the next year, and they take that cohort and expand it. And what they want to know is, in that cohort, what percentile rank are they now? And that's the calculation that's attached to each student. So you can imagine, 250,000 kids in the state? They're doing that calculation 250,000 times.
Yeah.
So I definitely can't mimic it. But I always check it, just check it. I just trying to get some insight on it. So what we do know that one group of children is counted twice on growth, and that is in the red quarter circle, which is the lowest 25th percentile rank of a school is going to be counted for the growth of the red and also the growth within the blue. So we know that if they aren't working diligently on that lowest 25th percentile rank, then they might possibly lose points on Arizona Learns. So as we go through we'll only be going through the stack bar charts of the district, but you can see some of our grade levels that maybe the false far below hasn't moved.
Mr. Zaragoza, if I could just address your question. I don't have a great answer for it, other than to say this is the second year we've had this, so we're still trying to calibrate what the meaning of these numbers are. What we know is that when we look at Papago, when we look at what happened at Papago, what this tells us is that we have to dig deeper, because this is more of a 10,000-foot view of what happened. And that what we have to do is now we have to dig deeper into the data to determine where things went awry, and then there has to be a process of conversation at the school site with the principal, with the teachers, and start asking the question why.
Mm-hmm.
Because they were the ones that were with these children every day, and getting to why is going to happen there. So it's a process of this 10,000-foot view,
Yeah.
and then breaking that down and looking into the details.
Yeah, I just look at this and okay, like +3, -3, like that doesn't seem, I guess I expect that. Like that's stable. But +28, -25, that's not stable. There's a huge, I don't know, like 20, it's significant. So like, what does it take to, who's responsible for that? I don't know. I guess those are things
Well,
I
and when you ask that question, who's responsible for that, that's where you go to digging deeper into the data, and you look at it grade level by grade level, teacher by teacher,
Mhm.
and student by student, and you
Yeah.
start looking at what were those challenges, what types of interventions took place, did those interventions take place soon enough? Dr. Spiller's already talked about this, you know, was there warning? Did the CFAs give warning? Did the quarterlies give us warning that there was something, and did we act on it? So as we look at this, whether it went up or down, because the conversation at Loma Linda and the conversation we've had with Loma Linda is a lot different than the conversation we had at Papago. But those are the kind of questions and processes we look at in terms of trying to understand what really did happen and what needs to change.
Yeah, I mean, I just look at these three, like LCK, Loma Linda, Monte Vista, because they're all like on the same street, a couple like less than a mile apart from each other. And like Monte Vista and LCK, like pretty stable. And then obviously Loma Linda, huge spike. Like, it's just,
We have theories
Yeah.
and about what actually happened there, and it really all had to do with personnel. In terms of how the personnel came together, how the personnel collaborated and worked together, and how well they worked together. That as we looked at it and we looked at the turnover of staff in that school, which has been over the past several years, been significant. We look at the coming together of their leadership team. We look at all of those things, and what we saw was a very well functioning system.
mm-hmm.
And there's a sense that what happened there was it all came together, and it was all hitting on all cylinders, and that created that effect.
And we won't even know if that is sustainable until we get another year or so or more.
Correct. And with that level of jump, that's you know, it'll be interesting to see, and I know that there's some turnover in staff there this year as well. That's significant. So you know, that's just one of our realities that we're looking at. That's just not at Loma Linda. That's across the district.
So
Love to-
quarter,
yeah, I mean,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
even if it's just 1 year's worth of data, I'd love to learn more about Loma Linda and like what happened this year. Like if we're talking about personnel, like where do they come from? And if we talk about the ones that are leaving, like why are they leaving? I think that would be useful data for me at a future board meeting.
So,
Could I mention something too? As we worked with Dr. Spiller and the leadership teams from the sites, working with individual sites and looking at data, as Dr. Spiller dug deep into the data, for example, looking at classroom lists, what became very apparent, especially as we looked at third grade, was that there may be 2 mainstream classrooms and 2 ELD classrooms at that grade level, but if you really look at those mainstream classrooms, there could be 2/3 of the students in that mainstream classroom who were in English language learning classes the year before and were again taking the Azella, and in all cases they didn't they didn't measure proficiency. So what we really know that it may be a mainstream classroom, but as kids move from one category to another, they really need the support. And, what support do they need, and how are we going to, how is the classroom teacher going to give that support, and how are we going to support them? So it's digging deep into that data, and the numbers, as you say, don't really tell us all that we need to know. So it's something that we'll be doing all year, and we did a lot of it last year too.
So during our quarterly assessment, we always look at data following each of the quarterly assessments. We look at the percent correct, the highest of the CFAs A and B. We look at the quarterly assessments. And what I do is I go back and look at my quarterly reports to the leadership team and say, did any school come up, on top? And I know last year frequently we saw Gateway come up. So the focus through the year was very intensive on Gateway. Well, that worked. But, Papago actually didn't come up as one of our focus schools, not until the third quarter. So, that's why we're in this continuous improvement process, and we're trying to refine how can we pick up that a school or a site might be struggling, so we can put some resources in place for them. So I guess, we all are, when these results come out, we go, did we know that Creighton, I expected Papa to go back a little bit just because building effect, but then Char and Jim always remind me, but when they switched to off-campus, their scores didn't fall, and I go, oh yeah, you're right. But, and then a new principal, we always expect, a new principal to have a hard time, and this year we have, 3 principals that have moved to different sites. So we definitely are trying to think ahead to say, if this is what the data look like for, how are we going to mitigate that for in the future? So based on Arizona Learns focus, we see that Creighton Excellency, Monte Vista, and Papago all had a decrease in Arizona Learns points. So part of our focus will always be on making sure we support these sites so that they delve into their data and try to identify what programs are working. So we call those program-centered problems. So right now, when we look at our third grade scores, we consider our kindergarten, first, second, and third grade to me, that's that early literacy program. So AYP is going to be different this year, and it used to be that schools were identified as in-school improvement or not in-school improvement, making adequate yearly progress or not making it. And what's interesting, just to let you know that something new is coming up. And AYP is going to come out in the middle of August sometime, and our schools are going to get labeled. They've already been the A through F labels, but now they're going to get another label. And it's going to be a reward school, pre-intervention schools, focus schools, or priority schools. Reward schools and pre-intervention schools are not in school improvement, but focus schools and priority schools will be. And this is what the definitions will be. So the reward schools will either be a high-performing or a high-progress reward school. So high-performing will be they have a letter grade of an A and that they have a very high percent passing rate. The high-progress schools, we're not sure if they're going to be they could possibly be A or B schools, but they have a very high growth rate. So it'll be interesting. We're still waiting for the real rules about it. When I look at the PowerPoints that are posted on ADE, I can't tell if each of the indicators are an and or an or, an A school and met the AMOs, or if it's A or making the AMOs. I don't know if they're and ors yet. And when I ask them, they can't tell me yet.
And this is all based on the school itself, not the district?
Right. But the district will also get no, you're right. I don't think the district gets this category.
We receive a letter, great.
Yes.
And just to clarify, this is part of the Arizona waiver to, so how long does that waiver last?
I actually don't know that.
Okay. Who was responsible for putting that together? Just the ADE, or did they involve other stakeholders?
I don't know.
Dr. Boyle, did West Ted help them with those waivers or did not?
You know, I'm not sure.
Or neither mine?
It's interesting that when Mr. Hubenthal became, is it county superintendent or state? State superintendent, that a lot of staff did change up at ADE, and I know different staff members were presented on the waiver that I've never heard present before. So that was interesting. So I can't really, I don't know what support they received, but I thought maybe they did get some help from our staff on that. So this is a new label that it's only been mentioned in a letter that was sent to us recently that said that there could be schools identified as pre-intervention schools, and we consider this like a warning that there's been a decrease in percent passing or a decrease in growth or a less than 50th percentile growth of the bottom 25th percentile ranked group. We actually, we could, if that last rule, less than 50 percentile in the lowest group, we already know some of our schools could be put in the pre-intervention group.
When
we can see
when
that.
these schools get these
New labels?
these AYP labels, I mean, we already have the A through F. We have. Do they still have the legacy labels, or are those gone?
Those are gone.
Okay. Now, will we have to put out a banner saying like this is a pre-intervention B school?
I don't know any of the
Just the-
compliance yet.
As far as what we have to, I don't think we have to put anything up, but we really don't know how the rules are going to work. We do know in Title I,
Mm-hmm.
because I was just going through that, those new budget forms yesterday with Pam Burkhart, that we will be able to choose to put resources, additional resources, into the focus in the priority schools at the district level. So they haven't really, the budget processing itself doesn't talk about reward schools. Although there is something in there, I think, that would allow additional monies from the state to go to the reward schools so that they could be kind of model schools for other schools to come and visit and so on. And then at the state level, the focus schools and priority schools, those schools that are in school improvement, there's a budgeting opportunity that's a little different from before that would allow us to give additional funds to those schools.
So it's more of an internal,
Focus funds.
like inside audience label, not for parents necessarily.
My guess is they'll release this publicly, yes, Dr.
It's gonna be federal. It's the control of those federal monies in the federal school improvement process. So we thought AYP was going to go away. We thought all that stuff, and it's not.
Yeah.
So that was my, oh, look, it's back, just new titles.
Uh-huh.
So they did send us out what the AMOs were going to look like, our old AMOs, where you compare, which is what's the minimum, the cut score for percent passing for school, all students in each subgroup and special population. So instead of, you know how in 2014 it was supposed to be at 100% of all students were supposed to be at proficiency, now they've stretched out to 2020.
Uh-huh.
So on the slides that I'm going to be showing you, we've actually already entered the new AMO to give us some idea of how close we are to meeting that AMO. So, okay, I just want to say that the other two labels are focus schools, and a focus school will be one that has, there's a big gap between these special programs or special population, or they have very low progress on that bottom quartile of students on the Ames test. Or there's a low achieving, if they have a low achieving a subgroup or special population, and then the lowest increase of the percent of the bottom quartile students passing names in math and reading. So they say these things, but I don't know what it looks like as a formula, so I can't like guess. You know, could we possibly have focused, I'm pretty certain we could have pre-intervention schools, and I think we might possibly have some focus schools, I'm just not certain. Now, we definitely don't have any priority schools, whereas the major emphasis will be on D schools with the lowest A through F total points, and an F school, which has had a D 2 years in a row, and none of our schools have ever been a D. So we know we won't have priorities.
Did that law pass that if they thought a D school, if the state board thought a D school had no chance to really like turn their act around, they could be streamlined to an F school to get more resources more rapidly?
I don't know that.
I don't know either.
The
We'll
state
check
board's
it out.
priority, yeah, that'd be great.
You know, as we look at this though, we've got all these definitions and what gets you in and what gets you out. And we've been through this before with the other federal labels. The bottom line, as I look at it, it still requires that you pay attention to the progress for every child. And in order to get to the place where you are in that rewards category, you can't neglect any group of children on your site. So the spirit of No Child Left Behind still exists within these new sets of rules.
And so, if after the election, Congress gets their act together, they reauthorize the SEA, these things could totally be out the door in February.
Why, yes. You are right on that.
Okay.
I hadn't thought of that, but yes. How interesting. Well, so I was just wanted to say that,
You know, it's one of those things where here's the rules of the game,
Yeah.
and so you start setting your system to effectively deal with those rules, and then the rules change, and we just, from the perspective of those of us who do this every day, we would just like the rules to stay the same for a while.
the rules and the tests.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. So this is what I call the green chart, at least it used to be green. So the one on the left was last year's AYP and how our sites and our subgroups in the special population performed on the AMOs. We were really excited because we were really showing progress on reading, and we just had issues with, you know, a couple of low grade levels. We look on the math side of it, and we could see a growing concern, particularly where special programs and special populations aggregate up to the district level. We really could see that our math program wasn't performing adequately, and we put a lot of resources in place for math last year. We had several professional developments for teachers during the year. They had subs that came together, and they worked with a really great consultant on math content. So as we moved into this year's, the AMOs went up, you know, not as much as I thought they were going to go up, because they were going to go up between 9 and 11% proficiency, but they went up between 4.5 and 7. And so now the green is turned into white again, and we can see that we need to refine our reading, because we know we have pretty good growth in reading, but it still has to remain a focus, and we have to refine math absolutely, because it's just not performing as well as we'd like it to perform. So we also, what we do is I just add up how many areas a site doesn't make it in, and that gives me some idea of what schools I should focus, you know, not I personally, but everybody at the leadership level needs to focus on. So we really, from this chart, we can see it's Gateway, Excellencia, and actually Loma Linda, even though they showed a lot of high growth this last year, they actually still have some grade levels that are low. So
If I could just interject for a second, you can see why we have to go through a lot of data and a lot of analysis to really fully understand how a school's performing. A label masks what's actually happening in detail, and so whether that label is rewards or priority, or whether that label is A or F, that's more for I guess for the public and for the politicians. In our world, it really comes down to looking at this from multiple directions and multiple perspectives to be able to say really what's going on and where does the focus have to be. And I think that's that's the bigger point as you see these almost conflicting, you see these wonderful trends, you know, over the years, and then as we start breaking this down and the new rules come into place, you see what really looks like a very scary chart with a lot of white, which we would prefer not to have. We would like it all to be the color of your shirt and be green. But so I think that this gives you an idea of the level of analysis that has to go on at the district level, at the site level, at the classroom level to really know what's going on and how to improve it.
So on this chart, as I look at it, before we had at the district level, we had all white in the math area, but we can see that we actually did improve 6th, 7th, and 8th grade last year in math. And when we look back on math to, gee, what, did the content workshops work for the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade teachers? We think maybe that could be part of it. Another part could be that we did put in place the math fluency at all grade levels, but maybe it was more effective for 6th, 7th, and 8th. So we have, we have a lot of hypothesis about improvement.
And we've done some analysis in terms of the work we did with math. There are 3 legs to the stool when you want to get to implementation. The first is the training, which was done very well and was very high quality. The second leg of that stool is the coaching and the support that a teacher needs to change their behavior within the classroom. And the third part of that stool is the accountability for implementing what was taught and what was coached. And last year, we did a great job of getting that training in place. This year, we have to go back and we have to make sure that that coaching and that accountability for implementation of those trainings are solid and in place so that we can get better implementation in the classroom.
So we did have some good news from you last year, but we're definitely, we live in the real world. We realize the AMOs are still going up and that we need to refine our programs within the resources that we have in order to get an increased rate of student achievement. Whoa.
Did you need this 8th grade?
No, I hit the end button instead of the forward button, so I have to go back. That was funny.
Okay, just
30-30.
Okay. So here was some of the good news that was, it was just, I actually didn't notice till I was editing the book, and I go, wow, look at those 8th grade science scores. So what we see is a real improvement at some of the sites. Almost all the sites showed a significant improvement. And so when I went back to curriculum instruction and said, gee, how come science rocked last year? That's when they reported that our 7th and 8th grade science and social studies teachers came together. They were supposed to be writing units for the next year, but PLCs really do work. They got to talk about what they're about to teach, develop some assessments, talked about instructional strategies, and I thought just the effect of the PLCs is what showed our increase in our 8th grade science scores. So, that was affirmation for me to say, they've always said, I need to be able to talk to another 8th grade teacher in this district. I need to be able to do it frequently. And so we gave them just 10 meetings this past year, and they really took advantage of it.
Yeah, I mean, what's good to see here too is Excellencia, 20 points increase in science, and the other slides with reading, math weren't as great as I'd like to see, but this is exciting.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
even if
And none of this is included in labeling.
Oh, no,
Correct.
absolutely not.
the other thing too is even looking at Excellencia, where you saw that white, right? Or look at Loma Linda. When you break it down and you go down to the classroom level, you see some really outstanding performance by teachers and students, and you also see some places where they had difficulties. So it's not none of this, whether you're looking at that green and white chart or you're looking at our stack, it's not, the results are not homogeneous. They're just not. We have, when you break it down by school and you start looking at every school, there's incredible performance taking place. There are some areas that are not real strong as well that have to be addressed. So, like like Lynn said, you have to look at it from all different angles.
We definitely see pockets of excellence. What we'd like to see is excellence systematic, but it's wonderful to celebrate these pockets of excellence that we see. What's interesting about these 8th grade science scores are these are one individual. You know, they truly are one person, you know, is accountable for a lot of these scores. They run the 7th or 8th grade science program. So, you know, we can celebrate their achievement. I'm just really happy. So,
And I was going to say, another positive thing that's happening this year is a common start time for all the schools. So this will
that's right.
help to ensure that the professional learning communities at the middle school level will be easier to attain with the same end time.
So we're going to look at the stacked bar charts because what stacked bar charts is allow us to see within a score range if there was improvement, just not the overall passing rate. Because as we drill down, we get to see more of the story, or the rest of the story. Remember, who is that guy? Oh, and the rest of the story. So this is 3rd grade. We're looking at reading on the left and math on the right. And 3rd grade is one of the areas we are very concerned about because we see a decrease in proficiency overall. To tell you the truth, there was no heads up from common formative assessments or no heads up from quarterly benchmarks. We actually predicted a 5% increase in 3rd grade. Well, that's Joe predicted that. I predicted 3%, but see, both of us thought there'd be an increase.
Do you have did you add the slides that you sent to Shar and I?
No?
We looked at some slides yesterday that kind of looked at other districts, and it appears that a lot of districts had problems with 3rd grade reading this year. It wasn't just us.
So then you bring that up, I think about the new legislation, the Move On When Reading legislation. I'm wondering if there's some psychological, like, 3rd grade teachers feeling like a lot more pressure and that affecting in a negative way their teaching. I don't know.
Yeah.
You want to hear
We
one of
have
our
a-
hypotheses? We're, when I see that the state fell back 1% and 4th
That's a lot
grade
of
fell
kids.
backwards and 5th grade fell backwards, and I'm like, how could the state fall back when we had such a positive trend at the state level?
Mhm.
So I emailed them and said, did you change the test? And right now they're saying, oh no, we're going to change the test next year and make passages more complex with a higher Lexile level. I'm wondering if they did it this year and they aren't telling us. I mean, how could they not tell us? But I'm still, somebody said, oh no, they told us that they were going to change it this year, but I've not got confirmation of that.
You know, we've been able to come up with theories for a lot of things that happened, whether they were positive. But that 3rd grade drop, other than that one, we haven't come up with an internal theory as to what might have happened. Because when we break it down by schools, we're a little bit baffled. And so we're still asking the question of why did 3rd grade do what it did? Not at all of our schools, but at most of our schools.
Mhm.
And then, of course, we're seeing similar types of results. Because a 1% fallback at the state level is a lot of children
Yeah.
that fell back.
So how much confidence do we have in statewide tests?
100% confidence that they do the right things. But if they don't do the, you know,
Because
they're
if we're
supposed-
using our own data and we're coming up with a different analysis that we're expecting growth, and then our kids are taking the same test as everyone else.
We do have
State.
one theory, and this actually came from Joseph Sohn. And this goes back to possibly not so much an instructional issue, but a curricular issue. The question that he posed, and we don't have the answer to, but did we focus too much on individual essential performance objectives and forget the greater standard that they make up? In other words, the standard is a larger piece of learning, and did we focus on too many of the little pieces without putting them together for the students to accomplish, to do well on the standards itself? And that's going to be, and that's a key question, because as we move into the Common Core, the standard is going to be the very, very important, and the children being able to achieve the specific standard and demonstrate on the standard is going to be very important. So that's a question that we have to explore a little bit more. We don't know the answer to. But that's one of the theories in terms of what might have happened in third grade.
But to answer your question about how much confidence do we have on state assessments, like previous to 2 years ago, we had absolutely no confidence in writing. The state's percent proficiency was going up and up very widely from year to year on that one question prompt with multiple, they changed how it was scored. They either had 2 people scoring the test or 1 person or a different person scoring each of the 6 trades. I mean, it just was a terrible test. And so nobody ever, I mean, all I could do was take whatever the state average percent proficiency was and subtract in the district and see if we changed the same to see if we had any increase in our writing scores. So writing's one that I don't have any confidence in. The last 2 years are almost stable. They've added multiple choice questions so that they can equate them from year to year. And so we're looking at them, I don't think I have it here, but I have it in the large book that you'll be receiving, where it shows the state averages over time, and you'll see that the writing has now become a little bit more stable. So but the state has already told us that as they migrate to the new Park assessment, that they are going to change the current Ames test in reading to increase Lexile level and text complexity, and they insist that the results of the test will be, you can use them to evaluate growth from year to year, because Arizona Learns depends on it, AYP depends on it, and we're going to use it in our teacher evaluation system. So right now on the listserv, the assessment people's listserv, that conversation is going on right now. If you change the item specification of assessment items on a test and make them more difficult, how could you possibly not make the test more difficult? So it's right now we're just discussing it in cyberspace.
And having done this for a lot of years, a lot of us in this room have, the state, we can't depend on the state because it changes,
Yeah.
right? So we have to look at the things that we specifically control.
Right.
And so when we look at reading, Miriam's going to talk a little bit in the next session about what we're going to be doing to shore up, to ensure that our teachers are skilled, kindergarten through third grade, at teaching reading. And so those are the kind of things that we can control. And that's what we want to focus on. So if we have enough indicators that says something's not right, we want to look at what we can control and put that into play, because we never know where the state's going to go, just because it's a political institution and those things change.
Yeah, I mean, here's the challenge for me. Like, tour a number of schools and districts and meet with educators across the country, and I feel like we have like some amazing things happening here, but to tell that story is very difficult when our metrics on which we're being evaluated change. That's why I'm excited for this project that we are working on with Max Foes, IWS. But yeah, these changing metrics are a challenge.
It's hard to capture growth if what you're comparing it to don't stay steady over time.
Yeah.
It's very difficult. And then we don't all take the NAEP test. I know you'd ask the question, why don't we all take the NAEP test?
Or why don't we just adapt that and make our own Creighton NAEP test so that we have...
Well, the trouble with the Creighton NAEP test would be we can't compare our performance to somebody else. We need to take a test that we can compare to everybody else so that we can say we anchor it in valid and reliable sources to say we have this type of growth. So it's, I know that the conversation was years ago was why don't we have a state assessment test, but we have lots of politics around we don't want the state to have control about education. But it's interesting, I think we're moving towards that. I mean, over time we're moving towards it. So I just wanted to return to third grade for a second. You know, the math, the exceeds category is high. We'd like to see a decrease in that falls far below category. We had a decrease in proficiency, so we saw a decrease in proficiency in both reading and math. And we really, you know, we're not positive why the math fluency initiative last year didn't work as well in the younger grades as it did in the older grades, but we're definitely committed to making sure math fluency is in place from the very beginning of the year this year. Because we really should see that falls far below shrink to nothing with increase in math fluency. And we already said we're perplexed by the third grade reading fluency, or reading comprehension. On fourth grade, we saw a decrease in proficiency also with a matching increase in falls far below. We're going to actually take a step backwards in many of our action plans where before we were asking for maybe teachers to start facilitating their data meetings. We're going to make sure facilitation takes place, because in that way we're monitoring the implementation of the CFAs in that reteach period to make sure that kids are getting the interventions they need. Because if people start skipping those steps, we will see our scores fall backwards. When we look at the fourth grade math, we can see, you know, like I said, the scale scores or the cut scores on the tests are both different. You only need 81% correct on the math to get an exceeds label on the test. We're very concerned about the falls far below group. It is exceedingly large. So we look at the fifth grade, we actually see also a decrease in proficiency and an increase in that falls far below group. So we're very concerned about our third through fifth grade program. So we're just going to have a refocus and a refinement on the reading section. We definitely have a very strong math initiative coming up, and I know that's what curriculum instruction is going to describe for you.
Dr. Spiller, is it possible to identify what effect the initiatives we've had with the iPods have had on third grade?
It's interesting that you asked that question because it was brought up to me. The initial analysis indicates there could have been a problem with the iPod implementation, so we're still peeling the onion on that one.
So at this point, we don't know that they've been positive or negative. They've just been a new
The first year it was positive. The second year indicates maybe a negative impact.
Okay.
So we just have to go in and see what was going on. We know that we always want to implement technology within the classroom as long as in a positive way.
Yeah.
We just have to make sure we're using the scientifically validated methods of implementing technology and make sure that it doesn't negatively impact the validated instructional methods to get fluency and comprehension in third grade.
The alignment of how that technology is used is critical. And so that's the question that we have in terms of in the first year when it's new and it's fresh and the district has trained, here's applications, and this is where one of the questions is, did we stray from that in the implementation? Did we lose some alignment and start building some things in with the use of those tools that weren't as aligned as they needed to be to correspond with the teacher's instructions? So that's one of the things that we're looking at right now. But
Third grade is our most fragile group of students.
on the other hand, our third grade reading went down for teachers who didn't have those tools too. So it's you're looking at degrees.
Sure.
So as we look at sixth grade, we actually saw an increase in proficiency in sixth grade with a matching decrease in the falls far below group. So we started to see a little bit of good news as we looked at the stack bar charts looking at our 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. As we look at sixth grade math, we see an increase in the exceeds group and exceeds in the proficiency overall, and then a decrease in the falls far below, which always makes us very happy to see that. As we looked at 7th grade, the reading proficiency increased with a matching increase in students in the exceeds category and a decrease in the false far below. We just love the 7th grade chart. That's the one I've been putting on things when I talk about, look at this wonderful growth within the district, because 7th grade looks just amazing. As we look at 7th grade math, we see an increase in the exceeds group to where 20% of the kids are in the exceeds. And we look, but then of course there's a matching 21% that's in falls far below. So we really want to,
Significant decrease
for the previous year, 7%. So we're very excited about the, we really do think in the higher grade, the math fluency actually worked. Even though it was implemented maybe starting from third quarter on, second quarter on. We're really excited about this year that we're going to make sure that math fluency starts from the beginning of the year. As we look at 8th grade, we saw an increase in reading proficiency. They had a decrease from last year, so I was really glad that, that might have been an outlier. We're not sure. The falls far below decreased from the previous year. If we look at the 8th grade math program, we're definitely very, very concerned about sending our 8th graders on to high school not adequately prepared, because we right now have 38% in the falls far below group, which is not good. So our key points for looking at our stacked bar charts is in 3rd grade, 4th grade, and 5th grade, both reading and math scores decreased. So we've already talked about how we're peeling the onion about what could have possibly affected those programs, and did we get adequate warning from our intermediate assessments to put an intervention in place. What we're very excited about actually was 6th, 7th, and 8th grade reading and math increase. So we sort of had an interesting effect on our more middle school type students. Just to reaffirm that, so we're constantly doing program evaluation and tweaking. This time of the year we're really in it full force, doing data analysis, evaluating, planning, and making new action plans for implementation for the beginning of the year. So just to let you know how we do this targeted interventions, we do what's called triangulate the data to determine our focus. We have a lot of data. We have our T4S observation, our WestEd recommendations when our coaches come on campus. We have our iSteep screener data, our quarterly action plans, and our RTI program evaluation. And when a school comes up as lowest on any one of our evaluations, we just sort of add it to the list, and then we count up how many times did a school or grade level come up on a list. So right now you can, I think it's on my next slide, but we know we want to focus on math, and we definitely want to focus on reading in 3rd through 5th grade. What we want to do is go back to maybe take a step back, making sure that our instructional coaches are doing initial planning with those grade levels, that our student achievement teachers are not releasing independence to those data meetings to those teachers. They need to be monitored for at least the 1st and 2nd quarter, and that our principals are focusing on their T4S within those grade levels to make sure the best practices are being implemented during the day.
Any reason why LCK doesn't come up on here as new principals?
I made a mistake. Did you go on? Oh yeah, I did skip him.
That's
Sorry.
because he's the.
Oh, but I say Gabe, I don't know why I didn't put LCK on there. Thank you for pointing that out, I'll fix it. Because if I show it at leadership, it will point it out to me. Okay, so I've already talked about how we're going to refine our focus for this year. We're very excited that Miriam and her team are going to present K-3 literacy workshops for those grade levels where we have very strong concerns about our reading comprehension. In mathematics, we're going to implement the math pathways and pitfalls. We're going to implement math fluency 3 times a year, and also run fluency, 10-minute fluency twice a day in math for K-6 classrooms. So we have some implementations ready to go. Just to remind everybody about the formula for success, the focus should be on communication. We frequently have these great ideas in our heads, but we don't communicate them, and if we don't communicate them, then people just get truly frustrated with us or confused by, you're saying this, you mean that, what's going on. If we leave out incentives for people, they just resent what we're asking them to do. The incentives for most people are that they're just on a team making a positive impact at the schools. So it's really important that we communicate our successes. We really have to provide skills and resources to teachers, because if they don't get those skills or resources, they get anxious and frustrated by you asking them to do things that they can't do because they haven't been trained. If we don't communicate our action plans, they feel like they're on a treadmill. I'm always working so hard, I never get anywhere. It's because they don't know that, we actually don't give them the beginnings and the ends of different interventions. So if we keep all the steps in place, and we have success, and we've had success in the past, and we're looking forward to it in this school year. There is me and team. Every one of us is part of this team, and each one of us needs to take ownership. So one of the workshops that we went to this year was Data Dialogues with Dr. Ilde Lasko-Kerr, and what her command was during that training was, every person that looks at data must take away an action that they're going to do to implement a change to make a difference. And so it's up to me to make a difference. I have to choose what I'm going to implement this year, monitor it, and follow through. So that's why we always say, if it's up to be, if it is to be, it's up to me. So, do you have any questions?
No questions.
No questions?
Thank you, Dr. Spiller.
Thank you.
So, according to our calendar of events, we're a little behind, so we'll move right along to our Initiative 1 curriculum, and board members take recess if you need individually.
If I could, we have a new member of our curriculum team. I would like to introduce to you Sylvia Earle. Sylvia is coming to us from Mount Vista, where